the first video lesson for the Crucible for English 3. To start the day off, let's start with a pun. Why don't anteaters get sick? Because they're full of antibodies. Moving on, though. So, this unit, this week, we're going to be reading The Crucible by Arthur Miller. This was a modern historical drama, which means that it's based on history, but there's a lot of fiction and exaggeration involved. Some of it's real, some of it's not. Written in modern times, but set in early America. First page is the bio. You can read that on your own, I'm sure. We're going to go ahead and skip to the beginning. But please bear in mind your study guides are important as you go through. These are found in the lecture notes. Remember, each day's notes or lectures are grammar, vocab, literature, writing. Literature portion always has the study guide. That's where it is every week. So, what is the setting for the Crucible? The setting for the Crucible is Salem, Massachusetts, in the year 1692, according to the text. Characters we're going to run into, as this is a play, it starts with the dramatis persona, the list of characters. Reverend Paris, Betty Paris. Reverend Paris is the Reverend of Salem at the time. Betty is his daughter. Tituba, which is their slave, I believe. Abigail Williams, Reverend Paris's niece that he takes care of because her parents are gone. And various other townspeople. Susanna Walcott, Mrs. Ann Putnam, Thomas Putnam, Mercy Lewis, Mary Warren, John Proctor, very important character there. We'll see why in a bit. Rebecca Nurse, Giles Corey, Reverend John Hale, who was called in later on. Elizabeth Proctor, Francis Nurse, Ezekiel Cheever, which is a fun name to say for some reason. Marshall Herrick, Judge Hawthorne, Deputy Governor Danforth, Sarah Good, and Hopkins. Apparently he doesn't get a first name. Not sure why. But we're going to look over Act 1 today, see how that goes. A small upper bedroom in the home of Reverend Samuel Paris, Salem, Massachusetts, in the spring of the year 1692. There is a narrow window at the left. Though it is leaded through its leaded panes, the morning sunlight streams. A candle still burns near the bed, which is at the right. Sorry, we're getting an announcement. Not sure if you heard that, but the intercom came on. Moving right along. There's a narrow window at the left. Through its leaded panes, the morning sunlight streams. A candle still burns near the bed, which is at the right. A chest, chair, and a small table are other furnishings. At the back, a door opens in the landing of the stairway to the ground floor. The room gives off an air of clean spareness. The roof rafters are exposed, and the wood colors are raw and unmellowed. As the curtain rises, Reverend Paris is discovered kneeling beside the bed, evidently in prayer. His daughter, Betty Paris, age 10, is lying on the bed inert. At the time of these events, Paris was in his middle 40s. In history, he cut a villainous path, and there is very little good to be said for him. He believed he was being persecuted wherever he went, despite his best efforts to win people and God to his side. In meeting, he felt insulted if someone rose to shut the door without first asking his permission. He was a widower with no interest in children or talent with them. He regarded them as young adults, and until this strange crisis, he, like the rest of Salem, never conceived that the children were anything but thankful for being permitted to walk straight, eyes slightly lowered, arms at their sides, and mouths shut until bidden to speak. His house stood in the town, but we today would hardly call it a village. The meeting house was nearby, and from this point outward, toward the bay or inland, there were a few small windowed, dark houses snuggling against the raw Massachusetts winter. Salem had been established hardly 40 years before. To the European world, the whole province was a barbaric frontier inhabited by a sect of fanatics who, nevertheless, were shipping out products of slowly increasing quantity and value. No one could really know what their lives were like. They had no novelists and would not have permitted anyone to read a novel or if one were handy. Their creed forbade anything resembling a theater or vain enjoyment. They did not celebrate Christmas, and a holiday from work meant only that they must concentrate even more upon prayer. Which is not to say that nothing broke into this strict and somber way of life. When a new farmhouse was built, friends assembled to raise the roof, and there would be special food cooked and probably some potent cider passed around. There was a good supply of ne'er-do-wells in Salem who dallied at the shovelboard in Bridget Bishop's Tavern. Probably more than the creed, hard work kept the morals of the place from spoiling. For the people were forced to fight the land like heroes for every grain of corn, and no matter how much time, they did not have much time for fooling around. That there were some jokers, however, is indicated by the practice of appointing a two-man patrol whose duty was to walk forth in the time of God's worship to take notice of such as either lie about the meeting house without attending to the word and ordinances, or that lie at home or in the fields without giving good account thereof, and to take the names of such persons, and to present them to the magistrates, whereby they may be accordingly proceeded against. This predilection for minding other people's business was time-honored among the people of Salem, and it undoubtedly created many of the suspicions which were to feed the coming madness. It was also, in my opinion, one of the things that a John Proctor would rebel against, for the time of the armed camp had almost passed, and since the country was reasonably, although not wholly, safe, the old disciplines were beginning to rankle. But as in all such matters, the issue was not clear-cut, for danger was still a possibility, and in unity still lay the best promise of safety. The edge of the wilderness was close by. The American continent stretched endlessly west, and it was full of mystery for them. It stood dark and threatening over their shoulders night and day, for out of the Indian tribes marauded from time to time, and Reverend Paris had parishioners who had lost relatives to these heathen. The parochial snobbery of these people was partly responsible for their failure to convert the Indians. Probably they also preferred to take the land from heathens rather than from fellow Christians. At any rate, very few Indians were converted, and the Salem folk believed that the virgin forest was the devil's last preserve, his home base and the citadel of his final stand. To the best of their knowledge, the American forest was the last place of earth that was not paying homage to God. So that's an interesting concept there. Forest not as a beautiful creation of God or something, but forest as the wilderness untamed. That's where the evil lies. The village is orderly and good. Wilderness, forest, filled with evil, bad. They actually believed Satan walked around out in the forest trying to get people to sign his book, and that's how you signed your soul away. You'll see later on in the story. For these reasons, among others, they carried about an air of innate resistance, even the persecution. Their fathers had, of course, been persecuted in England, so now they and their church found it necessary to deny any other sect its freedom, lest their New Jerusalem be defiled and corrupted by wrong ways and deceitful ideas. Now, that's an interesting point about the Puritans. They used to be in England, left for America and the colonies early on. They talk about being persecuted over in Europe and England, but the reason for that, if you have me for 12th grade English 4, you find out that it's because the Puritans killed the monarchs of England and took over and ruled for 11 years, led by a guy named Oliver Cromwell. They ruled, it was a big revolution, not too friendly, and eventually the people in England thought, we didn't like the monarchs very much, but we don't like these guys either. Let's get rid of them and bring the monarchy back. So they depose the Puritans, bring the heir to the throne back to England out of hiding in France. And it's at that point that they start clamping down on the Puritans after all those revolutions. And afterwards, the Puritans come to North America. So interesting backstory there. But anyway. They believed, in short, that they held in their city hands the candle that would light the world. We have inherited this belief, and it has helped and hurt us. It helped them with the discipline it gave them. They were a dedicated folk, by and large, and they had to be to survive life they had chosen or been born into in this country. The proof of their belief's value to them may be taken from the opposite character of the first Jamestown settlement farther south in Virginia. The Englishmen who landed there were motivated mainly by a hunt for profit. They had thought to pick off the wealth of the new country and then return rich to England. They were a band of individualists and a much more ingratiating group than the Massachusetts men. But Virginia destroyed them. Massachusetts tried to kill off the Puritans, but they combined. They set up a communal society, which in the beginning was little more than an armed camp with an autocratic and very devoted leadership. It was, however, an autocracy by consent, for they were united from top to bottom by a commonly held ideology whose perpetuation was the reason and justification for all their sufferings. So their self-denial, their purposefulness, their suspicion of all vain pursuits, their hard-handed justice were altogether perfect instruments for the conquest of this space. So antagonistic to man. But the people of Salem in 1692 were not quite the dedicated folk that arrived on the Mayflower. A vast differentiation had taken place, and in their own time a revolution had unseated the royal government and substituted a junta, which was at this moment in power. The times, to their eyes, must have been out of joint, and to the common folk must have seemed as insoluble and complicated as ours do today. It is not hard to see how easily many could have been led to believe that the time of confusion had been brought upon them by deep and darkling forces. No hint of such speculation appears on the court record, but social disorder in any age breeds much mystical suspicions, and when, as in Salem, wonders are brought forth from below the social surface, it is too much to expect people to hold back very long from laying on the victims with all the force of their frustrations. The Salem tragedy, which is about to begin in these pages, developed from a paradox. It is a paradox in whose grip we still live, and there is no prospect yet that we will discover its resolution. Simply, it was this. For good purposes, even high purposes, the people of Salem developed a theocracy, a combination of state and religious power, whose function was to keep the community together and to prevent any kind of disunity that might open it to destruction by material or ideological enemies. It was forged from a necessary purpose and accomplished that purpose, but all organization is and must be grounded on the idea of exclusion and prohibition, just as two objects cannot occupy the same space. Evidently, the time came in New England when the repressions of order were heavier than seemed warranted by the dangers against which the order was organized. The witch hunt was a perverse manifestation of the panic which set in among all classes when the balance began to turn towards greater individual freedom. When one rises above the individual villainy displayed, one can only pity them all, just as we shall be pitied someday. It is still impossible for man to organize his social life without repressions, and the balance has yet to be struck between order and freedom. The witch hunt was not, however, a mere repression. It was also, as is importantly, a long overdue opportunity for everyone so inclined to express publicly his guilt and sins, under the cover of accusations against the victims. It suddenly became possible and patriotic and holy for a man to say that Martha Corey had come into his bedroom at night, and that while the wife was sleeping at his side, Martha laid herself down on his chest and nearly suffocated him. Of course, it was her spirit only, but his satisfaction at confessing himself was no lighter than if it had been Martha herself. One could not ordinarily speak such things in public. So as you'll see later in the story, people are accused of witchcraft partly saying that they've projected their spirits into people's rooms at night to torture them, not actually walked into their bedrooms physically. That's interesting. Projecting oneself. Long-held hatreds of neighbors could now be openly expressed and vengeance taken, despite the Bible's charitable injunctions. Sorry, the intercom came on again. Landlust, which had been expressed by constant bickering over boundaries and deeds, could now be elevated to the arena of morality. One could cry witch against one's neighbor and feel perfectly justified into the bargain. Old scores could be settled on a plane of heavenly combat between Lucifer and the Lord. Suspicions and the envy of the miserable toward the happy could and did burst out in the general revenge. So, this story is one of multiple layers. On one layer, on the surface, people are accusing each other of witchcraft because they believe they might be witches and that witches need to die. However, beneath that, we have human beings, flawed human beings who hate each other for very normal, human, non-magical reasons. Families that live in one place for a very long time sometimes feud, argue, start hating each other. Certain families hate each other over land disputes, job disputes, old grudges, medical issues that weren't resolved properly. Maybe someone looked at somebody funny, I don't know. But there are grudges between these families. And instead of saying, I hate him because I want his land, or I hate him because of an old grudge, they're saying, he's a witch, or she's a witch. We should go get them. So, on the surface, accusations of witchcraft. Beneath that, just petty human squabbles being clothed in accusations of witchcraft. Yeah. Okay, so beginning here, Reverend Paris is praying now. And though we cannot hear his words, a sense of his confusion hangs about him. He mumbles then, seems about to weep, then he weeps, then prays again. But his daughter does not stir from the bed. The door opens, and his slave enters, Tituba in her 40s. Paris brought her with him from Barbados, where he spent some years as a merchant before entering the ministry. She enters as one does who can no longer bear to be barred from the sight of her beloved. But she is also very frightened because her slave sense has warned her that, as always, trouble is in this house, eventually lands on her back. I'm going to try to do some voices, guys, but it's going to be terrible. Also, if I run into a swear word of some kind, I don't remember if there are any in this book or not, but not actually going to swear on a recording of any kind. I'm just going to say fruit words. So if we run into a swear word, I'm going to say banana or apple or something, or just skip it altogether. Not actually going to say those words out loud. Sorry. Let's see. Tituba. Already taking a step backward. My Betty be hearty soon. Out of here. Backing to the door. My Betty not going to die. Scrambling to his feet in a fury. Out of my sight! She is gone. Out of my... He is overcome with sobs. He clamps his teeth against them and closes the door and leans against it exhausted. Oh my God. God help me. Quaking with fear, mumbling to himself through his sobs, he goes to the bed and gently takes Betty's hand. Betty, child, dear child, will you wake? Will you open up your eyes? Betty, little one. That's his daughter who's been unconscious since the event. He is bending to kneel again with his niece, Abigail Williams, 17 years old, enters, a strikingly beautiful girl, an orphan with an endless capacity for dissembling. Now she is all worry and apprehension and propriety. Uncle, he looks at her. Susanna Walcott's here from Dr. Griggs. Oh, let her come. Let her come. Abigail, leaning out the door to call to Susanna, who is down the hall a few steps. Come in, Susanna. Susanna Walcott, a little younger than Abigail, a nervous, hurried girl, enters. Paris, eagerly. What does the doctor say, child? Susanna, craning around Paris to get a look at Betty. He bid me come and tell you, reverend sir, that he cannot discover no medicine, for it is in his books. Paris. Then he must search on. Susanna. Ay, sir. He have been searching his books since he left you, sir. But he bid me tell you that you might look to unnatural things for the cause of it. Paris, his eyes going wide. No, no. There be no unnatural cause here. Tell him I have sent for Reverend Paris, or that he is Reverend Paris, sorry. Reverend Hale of Beverly, and Mr. Hale will surely confirm that. Let him look to medicine and put out all thought of unnatural causes here. There be none. So notice on your study guide it asks about Reverend Hale and why he's called in. Originally to look into this whole business of witchcraft and especially what happened the other day with his daughter and niece and whatnot. Susanna. Aye, sir, he bid me tell you. She turns to go. Abigail. Speak nothing of it in the village, Susanna. Paris. Go directly home and speak nothing of unnatural causes. Susanna. Aye, sir, I pray for her. She goes out. Abigail. Under the rumor of witchcraft is all about. I think you'd best go down and deny it yourself. The parlor is packed with people, sir. I'll sit with her. Paris, pressed, turns on her. And what shall I say to them? That my daughter and my niece I discovered dancing like heathens in the forest? Abigail. Uncle, we did dance. Let you tell them I confessed it, and I'll be whipped, if I must be, but they're speaking of witchcraft. Betty's not witched. Paris. Abigail, I cannot go before the congregation when I know you have not opened with me. What did you do with her in the forest? Abigail. We did dance, uncle, and when you leaped out of the bush so suddenly, Betty was frightened, and then she fainted. And there's the whole of it. Take a moment to pause and think, do you trust Abigail? Is she telling the truth? Think about that as we go along. Not all characters tell the truth. Paris. Child, sit you down. Abigail, quivering as she sits. I would never hurt Betty. I love her dearly. Paris. Now look you, child, your punishment will come in its time. But if you trafficked with spirits in the forest, I must know it now, for surely my enemies will, and they will ruin me for it. Abigail. But we never conjured spirits. Paris. Then why can she not move herself since midnight? This child is desperate. Abigail lowers her eyes. It must come out. My enemies will bring it out. Let me know what you have done there, Abigail. Do you understand that I have many enemies? Abigail. I have heard of it, uncle. Paris. There is a faction that is sworn to drive me from my pulpit. Do you understand that? Abigail. I think so, sir. Paris. Now then, in the midst of such disruption, my own household is discovered to be the very center of some obscene practice. Abominations are done in the forest. Abigail. It were sport, uncle. Paris, pointing at Betty. You call this sport? She lowers her eyes and he pleads. Abigail, if you know something that may help the doctor, for God's sake, tell it to me. She is silent. I saw Tituba waving her arms over the fire when I came to you. Why was she doing that? And I heard screeching and gibberish coming from her mouth. She were swaying like a dumb beast over the fire. Abigail. She always sings her Barbados songs, and we dance. Paris. I cannot blink what I saw. Abigail. For my enemies will not blink it. I saw a dress lying on the grass. Abigail. Innocently. A dress? Paris. Is very hard to say. A dress. And I thought I saw someone naked running through the trees? Abigail, a terror. No one was naked. You mistake yourself, uncle. Paris, with anger. I saw it. He moves to her, from her. Then resolved. Now tell me true, Abigail, and I pray you feel the weight of truth upon you. For now my ministry is at stake. My ministry and perhaps your cousin's life. Whatever abomination you have done, give me all of it now, for I dare not be taken unaware when I go before them down there. Abigail. There is nothing more, I swear it, uncle. Paris studies her, then nods, half convinced. Abigail, I have fought here 3 long years to bend these stiff-necked people to me. And now, just when some good respect is rising for me in the parish, you compromise my very character. I have given you a home, child. I have put clothes on your back. Now, give me upright answer. Your name in the town. It is entirely white, is it not? So Paris here is asking about Abigail's name in the town. That means her reputation. Reputation was very important. And he's asking, when people talk about you, is it good, what they say? Are the rumors good? Rumors are almost never good, but still, let's see. Abigail with an edge of resentment. Why, I am sure it is, sir. There be no blush about my name. Paris to the point. Abigail, is there any other cause that you have told me? For your being discharged from Goody Proctor's service? Goody meant Mrs. or good wife, basically. Mrs. Proctor's service. I have heard it said, and I tell you as I heard it, that she comes so rarely to the church this year, for she will not sit so close to something soiled. What signified that remark? So, once upon a time, Abigail worked for the Proctors, Mr. and Mrs. Proctor. Something happened. She was let go, fired. And now Mrs. Proctor will not sit in the same church as Abigail. Says Abigail is spoiled or soiled or tainted in some way by some sin or misdoing. Won't sit anywhere near her. Yeah, Abigail. She hates me, uncle, she must, for I would not be her slave. It's a bitter woman, a lying, cold, sniveling woman, and I will not work for such a woman. Paris. She may be, and yet it has troubled me that you are now 7 months out of their house, and in all this time no other family has ever called for your service. So after being fired, whatever rumor is out there, whatever her name is in town, no one else is hiring her. They heard something from the Proctors. What it is, we'll find out. Abigail. They want slaves, not such as I. Let them send to Barbados for that. I will not black my face for any of them. With ill-concealed resentment at him. Do you begrudge my bed, uncle? No, no, said Paris. Abigail in a temper. My name is good in the village. I will not have it said that my name is soiled. Goody Proctor is a gossiping liar. Notice that Abigail seems to care a lot about her reputation in town, in what people think of her and say of her. Keep that in mind as we go along. Enter Mrs. Ann Putnam. She is a twisted soul of 45, a death-ridden woman haunted by dreams. One thing to know about the Putnams before we continue is they want people's land. They want a lot of land that's not theirs. They want it. And they also don't like the Reverend for a certain reason. One of their family members was supposed to be Reverend, but Paris got the job instead. Never forgiven him for that. Old grudges. Break to new mutiny. But moving on. Paris, as soon as he sees the door open, no, I cannot have anyone. He sees her, and a certain deference springs into him, although his worry remains. Why, Goody Putnam, come in, Miss Putnam, full of breath, shiny-eyed. It is a marvel. It is surely a stroke of hell upon you. Paris, no, Goody Putnam, it is, Mrs. Putnam, glancing at Betty. How did she fly? How high? Paris, no, she never flew. Mrs. Putnam, very pleased with it. Why, it's sure she did. Miss Collins saw her going over Ingersoll's barn and come down light as a bird, he says. Paris, now look you, Goody Putnam, she never. Enter Thomas Putnam, a well-to-do, hard-handed landowner, nearly 50. Oh, good morning, Mr. Putnam. Putnam. It is a providence. This thing is out now. It is a providence. He goes directly to the bed. Paris. What's out, sir? What's... Mrs. Putnam goes to the bed. Putnam, looking down at Betty. Why, her eyes is closed. Look you, Anne. Mrs. Putnam. Why, that's strange. To Paris. Ours is open. And she doesn't mean literally, like their eyes have been opened to this witchcraft stuff. Paris, shocked. Your Ruth is sick? Oh, they're also talking about their daughter, Ruth. Mrs. Putnam with vicious certainty. I'd not call it sick. The devil's touch is heavier than sick.
Miss Judy, please can you go to Miss Davis's office? Miss Judy to Miss Davis's office, please.
Sorry for the third intercom interruption. It's death, you know. It's death driving into them, forked and hoofed. Paris. Oh, pray not. How does Ruth ail? Mrs. Putnam. She ails as she must. She never waked this morning, but her eyes open and she walks, and hears not, sees not, cannot eat. Her soul is taken, surely. Paris is struck. Putnam, as though for further details. They say you've sent for Reverend Hale of Beverly. Paris, with dwindling conviction now, so he's kind of regretting doing it for some reason. A precaution only. He has much experience in the demonic arts, and Mrs. Putnam. He has indeed. I found a witch. He found a witch in Beverly last year. Let you remember that. Paris. Now, goody Anne, they only thought there were a witch, and I am certain there be no element of witchcraft here. Putnam. No witchcraft? Now look you, Mr. Paris. Paris. Thomas, I pray you, leap not to witchcraft. I know that you least of all, Thomas, would ever wish so disastrous a charge laid upon me. We cannot leap to witchcraft. They will howl me out of Salem for such corruption in my house. Time for another block of the author narrator interjecting some history background information between portions of the play. A word about Thomas Putnam. He was a man with many grievances, at least one of which appears justified. Some time before, his wife's brother-in-law, James Bailey, had been turned down as minister of Salem. Bailey had all the qualifications and about 2/3 the vote into the bargain, but a faction stopped his acceptance for reasons that are not clear. Thomas Putnam was the eldest son of the richest man in the village. He had fought the Indians at Narragansett and was deeply interested in parish affairs. He undoubtedly felt it poor payment that the village should so blatantly disregard his candidate for one of its more important offices, especially since he regarded himself as the intellectual superior of most of the people around him. So basically the Putnams thought, we're rich, we got a lot of land. They should put the Reverend in charge that we choose because we're rich and powerful. They didn't. They voted on it, voted on someone else. Putnams have been ticked off ever since. His vindictive nature was demonstrated long before the witchcraft began. A former Salem minister, George Burroughs, had to borrow money to pay for his wife's funeral, and since the parish was remiss in his salary, he was soon bankrupt. Thomas and his brother John had Burroughs jailed for debts the man did not owe. The incident is important only in that Burroughs succeeded in becoming minister where Bailey, Thomas Putnam's brother-in-law, had been rejected. The motif of resentment is clear here. Thomas Putnam felt that his own name and the honor of his family had been smirched by the village, and he meant to right matters however he could. Another reason to believe him a deeply embittered man was his attempt to break his father's will, which left a disproportionate amount to his stepbrother. As with every other public cause in which he tried to force his way, he failed at this as well. So it is not surprising to find that so many accusations against people are in the handwriting of Thomas Putnam, or that his name is so often found a witness corroborating the supernatural testimony, or that his daughter led the crying out at the most opportune junctures of the trials, especially when, but we'll speak of that when we come to it. Putnam. At the moment, he is intent upon getting Paris, for whom he has only contempt, to move toward the abyss. Mr. Paris, I have taken your part in all contention here, and I would continue, but I cannot if you hold back in this. There are hurtful, vengeful spirits laying hands on these children. Paris. But Thomas, you cannot. Putnam. Anne, tell Mr. Paris what you have done. Mrs. Putnam. Reverend Paris, I have laid 7 babies unbaptized in the earth. Believe me, sir, you never saw more hearty babies born, and yet each would wither in my arms the very night of their birth. I have spoke nothing, but my heart has clamored intimations, and now, this year, My Ruth, my only. I see her turning strange. A secret child she has become this year, and shrivels like a sucking mouth. We're pulling on her life, too. And so I sought to send her to your Tituba. So before we continue, basically Mrs. Putnam has had 7 miscarriages, and now she's trying to blame witchcraft for the miscarriages. Paris. To Tituba? What may Tituba, Mrs. Putnam? Tituba knows how to speak to the dead, Mr. Paris. Goody Anne, it is formidable sin to conjure up the dead. Mrs. Putnam. I take it on my soul, but who else may surely tell us what person murdered my babies? You see, for their religion and for various denominations and religions, speaking to the dead is a pretty big sin. That's not good. They do not allow that at all. It's pretty much on par with witchcraft. So interesting that they just admitted to asking for it. Paris, horrified. Woman! Mrs. Putnam. They were murdered, Mr. Paris, and mark this proof, mark it. Last night my Ruth were ever so close to their little spirits. I know it, sir, for how else is she struck dumb now, except some power of darkness would stop her mouth? It is a marvelous sight, Mr. Paris. Putnam. Don't you understand it, sir? There is a murdering witch among us, bound to keep herself in the dark. Paris turns to Betty, frantic terror rising in him. Let your enemies make of it what they will. You cannot blink it more. Paris to Abigail. Then you were conjuring spirits last night. Abigail whispering. Not I, sir. Tituba and Ruth. Note that now that the matter's pressed, Abigail is throwing Tituba and Ruth under the bus. Paris turns now with new fear and goes to Betty, looks down at her, and then gazing off. Oh, Abigail, what proper payment for my charity? Now I'm undone. Putnam, you are not undone. Let you take hold of here. Wait for no one to charge you. Declare it yourself. You have discovered witchcraft. Paris, in my house? In my house, Thomas. They will topple me with this. They will make of it a... Enter Mercy Lewis, the Putnam servant, a fat, sly, merciless girl of 18. The narrator is not kind. Mercy, your pardons. I only thought to see how Betty is. Putnam, why aren't you home? Who's with Ruth? Mercy, her grandma come. She's improved a little, I think. She give a powerful sneeze before. Mrs. Putnam, there's a good sign of life. Mercy, I'd fear no more, Goody Putnam. It were a grand sneeze. Another like it will shake her wits together, I'm sure. She goes to the bed to look. Now there's some modern medicine right there. Paris, will you leave me now, Thomas? I would pray a while alone. Abigail, Uncle, you've prayed since midnight. Why do you not go down and... Paris, no. To Putnam, I have no answer for that crowd. I'll wait till Mr. Hale arrives. To get Miss Putnam to leave. If you will, Goody Anne. Putnam, now look you, sir. Let you strike out against the devil, and the village will bless you for it. Come down, speak to them, pray with them. They're thirsting for your word, mister. Surely you'll pray with them. Paris, swayed. I'll lead them in a psalm, but let you say nothing of witchcraft yet. I will not discuss it. The cause is yet unknown. I have had enough contention since I came. I want no more. Mrs. Putnam. Mercy, you go home to Ruth, do you hear? Mercy. Hi, Mum. Mrs. Putnam goes out. Paris to Abigail. If she starts for the window, cry for me at once. Abigail. I will, Uncle. Paris to Putnam. There is a terrible power in her arms today. He goes out with Putnam. Abigail with hushed trepidation. How is Ruth sick? Notice it's just the young girls talking together now. The adults are out of the room. The tone is going to shift a little bit, especially Abigail's tone. Mercy. It's weirdish. I know not. She seems to walk like a dead one since last night. Abigail turns at once and goes to Betty, and now, with fear in her voice, Betty? Betty doesn't move. She shakes her. Now stop this, Betty. Stir up now. Sit up. Betty doesn't stir. Mercy comes over. Mercy, have you tried beating her? I gave Ruth a good one and it waked her for a minute. Here, let me have her. Notice they left that out before. Big sneeze. Ooh, she must be waking up. Left out the part that she hit her. It's one side of the truth for the adults and one side they keep to themselves. Abigail, holding Mercy back. No, he'll be coming up. Listen now. If they be questioning us, tell them we danced. I told them as much already, trying to get their story straight for the interrogation. Mercy, aye, and what more? Abigail, he knows Tituba conjured Ruth's sisters to come out of the grave. Mercy, and what more? Abigail, he saw you naked. Mercy claps her hands together with a frightened laugh. Oh, Jesus. Enter Mary Warren, breathless. She is 17, a subservient, naive, and lonely girl. Mary Warren, what'll we do? The village is out. I just come from the farm. The whole country's talking witchcraft. They'll be calling us witches, Abby. Mercy, pointing and looking at Mary Warren. She means to tell it, I know it. Mary Warren. Abby, we've got to tell. Witchery's a hanging error. A hanging like they done in Boston 2 years ago. We must tell the truth, Abby. You'll only be whipped for dancing. And the other things. Abigail. Oh, we'll be whipped. Mary Warren. I've never done none of it, Abby. I only looked. Mercy, moving menacingly towards Mary. Oh, you're a great one for looking, aren't you, Mary Warren? What a grand peeping courage you have. Betty, on the bed, whimpers. Abigail turns to her at once. Abigail. Betty? She goes to Betty. Now, Betty, dear, wake up now. It's Abigail. She sits Betty up and furiously shakes her. I'll beat you, Betty. Betty whimpers. Ma, you seem to be improving. I talked to your papa, and I told him everything, so there's nothing to. Betty darts off the bed, frightened of Abigail, and flattens herself against the wall. I want my mama. Abigail with alarm as she cautiously approaches Betty. What ails you, Betty? Your mama's dead and buried. Betty, I'll fly to mama. Let me fly. She raises her arms as though to fly and streaks out for the window. Gets one leg out. Notice it looks like she'd rather jump out the window than actually face down this interrogation and all the public embarrassment. Let's see, Abigail, pulling her away from the window. I told him everything. He knows now. He knows everything. Betty, you drank blood, Abby. You didn't tell him that. Abigail, Betty, never say that again. You will never. Betty, you did. You drank a charm to kill John Proctor's wife. You drank a charm to kill Goody Proctor. Interesting. Let's put this together. She worked for the Proctors. She was fired. And now Mrs. Proctor will not go near her because she says she's soiled, sinful. And now we're hearing that Abigail wants the wife dead, tried to make a curse against her. Why might that be? What might they have done? What might have happened? Stay tuned. Let's see. Abigail smashes Betty across the face. Shut it. Now shut it. Betty collapsing on the bed. Mama, mama. She dissolves into sobs. Abigail. Now look you, all of you. We danced. And Tituba conjured Ruth Putnam's dead sisters. And that is all. And mark this. Let either of you breathe a word, or the edge of a word, about the other things, and I will come back to you in the black of some terrible night, and I will bring a pointy reckoning that will shudder you. And you know I can do it. I saw Indians smash my dear parents' heads in on the pillow next to mine, and I have seen some reddish work done at night, and I can make you wish you had never seen the sun go down. She goes to Betty and roughly sits her up. Now you sit up and stop this. So Abigail, all nice and stuff when the adults are around, threatens to kill the other girls if they don't get their story straight behind closed doors. Such a nice person. But Betty collapses in her hands and lies inert on the bed. Mary Warren with historical fright. What's got her? Abigail stares in fright at Betty. Abby, she's going to die. It's a sin to conjure. Abigail, starting for Mary. I say, shut it. Mary Warren, Enter John Proctor. On seeing him, Mary Warren leaps in fright. And that's where we're going to pause for the moment in our recording. We will resume next time.